Hello, everyone, and welcome to Wine Grants, unscripted chat about the unfunded, the official podcast of the Unfunded List. I'm your host, Dave Moss of the Moss Family Foundation. With me this week is Sarah Hillware. We're drinking a fine Malbec this week. Please say hello to the audience, Sarah.
Hello, everyone, and thanks, David, for having me on.
Well, thank you for coming. Welcome to the booth.
Thank you.
Now, as I'm sure you're aware, because you supplied this bio, I start every show off by reading my guest's bio out loud, and let's just get right into it.
Cool.
Sarah Hillware is a social entrepreneur, new business development professional, and champion of young women's health, community engagement, and women's empowerment. She received the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Award during her time at the George Washington University, and has received nominations for the YSA List, the 25 Most Powerful and Influential Young People, the 2011 Under 25 Glamour Magazine Woman of the Year, the 2013 40 Under 40 Awards, In the Capital's 50 on Fire Awards, and L'Oréal Paris's USA's Women of Worth Awards. Most recently, she was named one of 15 women in the capital area to be part of the inaugural chapter of Camp Campbell, which is Campbell Soup Company's executive mentorship program for women. She was, for a while, an online radio host and executive producer of a socially conscious talk show, and she is the founder and director of Girls Health Ed, a not-for-profit health education program for girls ages 8 to 17. Sarah has appeared on NBC Washington, in the Washington Examiner, the Washington Post, and multiple local blogs and magazines, and recently presented her ideas on global girls' health education at the United Nations headquarters through TEDx UN Plaza. And right now, she's in a booth with Dave Moss.
Yes.
Very impressive bio. I think we'll get to some of this stuff here, but let's get started with the nonprofit that you run, Girls Health Education. I never was a girl, so but I am aware that perhaps we fall short in certain areas, perhaps even shorter abroad in educating girls about some of the unique aspects of their health. Can you tell the dozens of people who might be listening about your nonprofit and the work that you do?
Absolutely. So I founded Girls Health Ed in 2012, and I kind of put together a team of very smart people who I knew who were in the medical fields, education fields, and who had also worked with youth. And I actually got the idea to start this organization because I did a research project. I was actually working on a thesis at George Washington University, where I went to college, and I took this amazing class in the Graduate School of Public Health at GW. And I actually found through that class that there were so many issues that just really had no space. So, you know, in public health, there's this area of maternal and child health. Then there's this area of women's health, and there's child health, right? But there's no space for adolescent girls. And at the time, I mean, International Day of the Girl wasn't really a thing. There were some organizations that focused on girls, but they didn't really focus on girls' health. So I said, there's this huge gap. And through that research project, I actually had discovered through visiting schools and community centers and things like that, you know, even with programs that sought to empower girls, there weren't very many programs that sought to empower them with knowledge about their bodies. You know, so through talking to girls and finding out what some of their needs were, I said, okay, here are the 5 things that are not being talked about. And that is nutrition for girls, physical fitness for girls, personal care and hygiene, which also includes menstruation, which is a huge taboo topic, and then also body anatomy, reproductive health, and self-esteem, right? So kind of that cornucopia of things that, were sometimes being taught in a vacuum through somewhat sex ed, somewhat PE, but never really, kind of brought together in a synthesis of girls' health and comprehensive health. So I started a pilot program through a charter school in a public school here in Washington, D.C., and we had about 12 girls in the program. That went well, and then we ended up expanding. So we're now in 5 different areas throughout the U.S. So D.C., Baltimore, New York City, Los Angeles, and Denver. And then we've also recently, this past summer, expanded to Kenya through the Mama Sarah Obama Foundation.
Wow. That's awesome. Just listening to you just now, the your origin story is very interesting, and it seems as though you found an area where not enough attention was being paid, which is very much the focus of. Very much the focus of the unfunded list is to try to identify projects that aren't very much being funded. Why do you suppose it is? Given that there are many funders who are interested in girls, in empowering them, there are many funders who are interested in health. Health is probably one of the areas that receives the most amount of donations. Do you suppose it's and you touched on it a little bit. Menstruation is somewhat of a taboo topic. I do believe this is the first time we've ever discussed menstruation here in the booth.
Great.
When Lesko was here, we may have talked about it. I'm not sure. You're absolutely right. I mean, I remember my own health education. I don't think it came up at all. I remember once they separated the boys and girls during health class. I assume that's when it happened. I'm not so sure how much I need to know. What do you suppose it is that causes that to be an unfunded or an area that fell in the gap? Is that?
I think you touched on it a little bit. The taboos are not only there, but they're ingrained in the way that we interact with each other. They're ingrained in the way that we raise our children, in the way that we approach everything. And this is true in the U.S. and it's even more true in developing countries. And I think that, the reason that this really isn't talked about is just because, one, I think that, it's a gender divide. And so girls are already taught to be very quiet growing up. And then secondly, it's like, if girls are already taught to be quiet and subdued, then they can't advocate for themselves. And if they can't advocate for themselves, then, the way that we empower and teach them will not change. So... women are adults and they at some level can advocate for themselves, and men are always taught to be outspoken and advocate for themselves. And I think that this is an area that's just been largely ignored, and throughout history it's been something where it's just kind of the norm to say, hey, this is just something that everyone has to go through, so you kind of have to shut up and suck it up, and that's pretty much it.
What's interesting to me is that we would ignore an area that affects literally all girls.
Yeah.
And you're right. One of the buzzwords that makes me roll my eyes generally is empowerment. I mean, the idea that young girls, you're empowered, but don't talk about your period.
Right.
And certainly don't post it on Instagram or whatever.
Exactly.
But I mean, this is a universal thing, and if you're weirded out by it, that's just irrelevant. Get over it. There's weirder stuff out there.
Yeah, exactly.
It sounds like you're doing fantastic work. The organization is called
Girls Health Ed. Yes. And we actually specifically shortened it. So it was at first the Girls Health Education Project, and we specifically shortened it from that to be Girls Health Ed to represent like health ed that you're taught in schools, or physical ed like PE. So it's actually Girls Health Ed and not Girls Health Education.
That's a great name. Although I would just to push back a little bit. Have you thought about maybe going longer, adding some more words? Girls Health Ed Empowerment Education Impact. So, I don't know. I'm just throwing things out there. This is unscripted chat in the booth, ladies and gentlemen. You don't have to say yes or no now, but if you feel free to use that idea if you want.
Well, Dave, if we're ever thinking about rebranding.
Any more thoughts I can give on that front, the better. One thing that struck me about your bio is that it sounds like you've been nominated and or recognized on a number of lists. And the ultimate product of the unfunded list is that we will, to my knowledge, for the first time ever, publish a list of the best nonprofit projects that have never been funded. If Girls Health Ed has if you have a rejected grant proposal or something, please send that in. I'll do what I can with the committee. The committee makes the decisions about the list, not me. One of the reasons why I want to do that is because I've seen in many other areas, right? We have the Forbes under 30 list. BuzzFeed comes out with some sort of list every day.
Yeah.
There is, I think, a lot of potential in lists and being on lists. And I wonder, of these various recognitions that you've received, is there one that was particularly useful to you as a professional that you'd like to talk about? Because I really want to hammer home why it's important. Sort of the power of the honorable mention, the power of recognition
Yeah.
for things is can be very useful, especially for folks who are small and just trying to get their name out there.
Right. And I think that, to backtrack a little bit, it's less about the recognition itself and it's more about the network that it comes with.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that one of the most valuable things for me has just been that opportunity to be able to deepen some of those professional relationships. And you and I are both a part of Nexus, and so was your
Sure.
last guest. And I think that that's very valuable and it's wonderful, but to be part of something that's so small, and it's 100 people or 40 people or 15 people, I think is just completely irreplaceable. Because you really get to that intimate space where you're able to not only connect with somebody on one or two things, but you're able to connect with somebody on many different levels, and then build a relationship that can really last a lifetime. And I actually got recommended to a couple of these lists because I've had friends or colleagues from way back when who I'd helped at some point, or maybe they'd helped me at some point, and it just kind of comes back around, and it's a circle of giving, and it's a circle of helping one another. And I'm especially a big advocate of women helping women, and especially when it comes to this. 40 under 40, that actually I was recommended for through a friend of mine who I'd actually known in high school, believe it or not, who then worked on the committee to put together this list. And she reached out to me and said, hey, why don't you apply? And then I reached out to some friends and asked them to apply, and I ended up being part of the list. But I think that was particularly valuable for me because now I'm on the committee to help solve some of the problems and to help select some other folks for next year. So it's the circle of giving back, and I think that's really the benefit of this. You get to be mentored, and then you are a mentor. And for me, I think that's more valuable than the actual recognition itself.
Was there certainly though, and hopefully though, for my purposes, there is some value to being on the list, these sorts of lots of the folks who do this sort of on the ground work, go to Kenya and teach girls about their sexual and just in general their health issues. Just because you're really good at designing a program like that doesn't necessarily mean you're also good at getting the word out about your program or about all the cool work that you're doing.
Yeah.
And certainly far fewer people would know about you and about the great impact and the great choices you've made with your adult life. Certainly, there were probably
Thanks,
there were probably other more lucrative opportunities available to you, if I'm not mistaken there. And you've chosen to do good in the world, and I think that it's really important to provide recognition for that in a thoughtful way. And as you mentioned, we are the last guest in here, Anastasia. Is a good friend of both of ours. Hello, Anastasia. Hope she'll probably.
Hi, Anastasia.
We won't tell her that we said hello. This will be a little test to see if
if she's actually listening.
If she listens to episodes that she wasn't on. But you mentioned that we are both members of the Nexus Global Youth Summit. I've actually been a member since before it was called Nexus.
Yeah. Wow.
And it was the low-level meeting on youth philanthropy at the United Nations. Because everybody wants to go to a low-level meeting, right? I think that's just been very, very valuable to me.
For sure.
The networking piece and the opportunity to have real substantive connections. Very interesting. Anastasia and I recently went on a trip funded by the Schusterman Foundation to Israel. We had known each other for a while here in D.C., but usually we saw each other at D.C. social events or in meetings, meetings that end on the hour, whether we're finished or not, right?
Yeah.
And the opportunity to have a conversation with her, on a beach or just sit next to her on the bus for a while, and have unscripted conversations that we have here in the unfunded booth.
Yeah.
Is really valuable as well. Not something we plan to talk about today, but it's something I've been harping on lately. People, particularly in this town and in this sector, can sometimes, I think, over-professionalize their interactions.
Totally. And I think that, so you brought up another great point, and I actually met Anastasia through Nexus, or
Really?
not directly through Nexus, but through another group, another summit that involved a lot of Nexus members. And I actually met her in London.
Oh, cool.
At the Young G8 Summit.
Oh, awesome.
And then we realized later that we actually were both DC residents. And so then we met up again here. And it's so funny because for the first few months that we knew each other, we actually met up everywhere except for DC.
Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
have several people who I was just in San Francisco last week, and I saw a lot of folks who were from here that I don't ever see. Because we had our hour-long meeting once, and now there's no particular reason to follow up. But it is nice you got to go to those things, and like I said, lots of people who work in this sector who are very good at the sort of heads-down work. Don't necessarily see the value in those network. Because I'm doing girls' health education. Why would I go to the Young G8, right? Or why would I need to be on a list that doesn't necessarily?
Well, here's the thing. So, where I was going with that, in the thing with the Young G8 and all that is, you never know who you can help or who might help you. And I think the value of lists like this, and the value of things like Nexus, and the value of these, groups that aren't all, necessarily professional networking events, but they are opportunities for you to develop relationships, are so much more valuable than people realize, especially in a town like DC, where the first question is, "Hey, Dave, what do you do?"
Yeah, what do you do?
Exactly.
After this, I'm just going to go out to the sidewalk and just ask people who walk by, "What do you do? Hello, what do you do? What do you do?"
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
And if they do something I'm interested in, then I ask their name, and then maybe we can have a conversation.
Right. But I think the value is, so look, I mean, the Mama Sarah Obama Foundation, who we're working with in Kenya, I met the executive director of that foundation through an event, Women's Entrepreneurship Day, and I found out about Women's Entrepreneurship Day because I was part of Nexus,
Wendy
and
Diamond.
I was a part of Nexus because I met Sergio and then Rachel, and it was just kind of like a ripple effect from there. And I think that and that partnership developed, and now we have our first ever male board member for as a part of Girls Health Ed, Jeff Hoffman, and we met
that
through
too.
Women's Entrepreneurship Day. So there's this whole spiral effect, and I think that a lot of people just undervalue their. They ask me, Sarah, well, how do you develop these partnerships? How do you develop these collaborations and these intersections here? And I said, well, you kind of have to think outside the box, and you kind of have to just go into some events, or go into some relationships with no expectations, and then you come out with something even more valuable than you would have ever expected.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's a really great story. I'm sure, and I think you need to be open to to having relationships with people who they're not necessarily going to help you themselves.
Yeah.
Right. Everybody knows all kinds of folks, and you don't necessarily know. I mean, we both have a long track record of forging partnerships and stuff. And rarely is it just like, I want to partner with that organization. And I
Right.
call the person who works in the partnership department and I say, what do you do?
Right.
And then they tell me, and then we have a partnership. It's really hard.
That's not how it works.
I mean, I've done things where like, I met somebody on a yacht once, and that ended up turning into something.
Right.
Certainly my first conversation with Sergio, I did not think that was going to turn into anything professional. But I ended up working for him for a while and doing a couple other things for him, including the It's an Us campaign at the White House, right?
Yeah, which is amazing.
Thanks. I did certainly though, based off my first, when I was having my first conversation, that didn't come up. None of those issues came up. But I was, I think it's because I was open to and being friendly and just being general.
Exactly.
Reaching out to people.
Be a real person.
Be an actual human being, not a
Right.
networking robot. Is really, really good advice. And I think be a real person. I think you've summed it up there. I do want to talk a little bit about this your most recent accolade. Because it sounds really interesting to me, and I had never heard about it. They're not sponsoring us, although they certainly could afford to. The Campbell Soup Company, which most folks have heard of. It's not just an Andy Warhol painting. They actually make delicious soups. I'm the Alphabet and the
And
Chicken
G8 and
Stars.
Pepperidge Farms.
All kinds of cool products. They also have an executive mentorship program for women. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Anastasia, our last guest, also a member of that. So clearly they have a very talented class. And I'm sure it's a small town. I probably know some of the other ladies on the.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm so excited tomorrow to meet the other 13
you're going
of us
tomorrow?
who are.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, awesome.
So the inaugural opening launch event is tomorrow in DC. So there were 15 of us who were selected. Anastasia was one of them. But there are 13 other women who have no idea who they are.
Oh, really?
So I'm excited to meet them.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. And what is the purpose of this? Just general mentoring?
Yeah. So this is a
advance
very
your career. What is the?
So the Campbell Soup Company. It's a Fortune 500 company, and the CEO is actually a woman. Her name is Denise Morrison.
I'd like to meet her. Is she married?
Well, I don't know. I have to find that out.
Put in a good word for me.
Maybe I'll ask her tomorrow.
Yeah.
But yeah, so she 3 years ago decided that she wanted to start something that was very small and intimate for women leaders who were doing good things in the world, who were entrepreneurs, and so forth. And so 3 years ago, she started Camp Campbell, which is essentially this, mentorship program for young women. So women leaders all across the nation and also in Toronto at different major cities have an opportunity to be a part of this chapter where they then have access to the CEO, Denise Morrison, and any executives or other professionals within Campbell Soup Company.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's really, really cool. And, it's not a program that's marketed very much. It's not something that they're doing a whole lot of advertising for or anything. And I talked a little bit about women helping women. I actually found out that one of my friends who had been part of the New York chapter had actually recommended me. So that's actually how they found me. And there's this whole reciprocal thing going on.
Awesome. Well, best of luck to it.
Thank you.
Please put in a good word for me with all of the ladies.
I will.
At Camp Campbell,
I will.
I'm sure they're all very impressive. Speaking of incubators, as always, the Unfunded podcast is Wine Grants is always shot here at the Lookout DC, a beautiful co-working community for filmmakers located in the Adams Morgan neighborhood of Washington DC, and we are a collaborative collective, I think is the official term that Ian uses.
Cool.
But we are also very much an incubator. As you came in, you probably noticed today's moving day for one of our companies who started here, incubated them. They grew eventually to be too large. Good Fight Media, as they've moved, they're going over to Union, near Union Station or side. I'm not exactly sure where they're moving.
Congratulations.
This is our first the first time we've ever seen a company take flight and go off on their own, have their own office space.
Yeah.
We wish them all the best. I think that ties in very well to some of the things we've discussed today. There's the work, there's the head down stuff, there's Excel spreadsheets you have to do.
Yeah.
You have to remember you're a real person. You have to think about the value of incubation.
Yeah.
Keep your ear to the ground for nominations or lists you may be on that may bring additional recognition to your work. And of course, if your grant has been rejected, please send your proposals to the unfunded list. We'll give candid feedback, suggestions, or even possibly even phone calls for follow-up. Our aim is for the committee to be as helpful as possible to our grantees. I hope on the off chance that Girls Health Ed has ever been rejected, I hope you'll consider sending a proposal to us.
Yeah. And also recommend other organizations.
Yes, please.
Yeah,
please.
we'd love that.
If anybody in your networks or folks who are on the list, or if anybody at Camp Campbell tomorrow
Okay.
has a rejected grant proposal, please encourage them to send it in. But for now, thank you very much for joining us in the booth. I hope you'll come back soon.
Thanks for having me.
Oh,
I've
thank
enjoyed
you.
the wine and the grapes and the royal treatment.
Thank you.
Seeing the
Thank you.
space.
Thank you, everybody, for listening. And as always, good luck with your funding.